Okay. Right. So, okay, so welcome everyone to the Irish American Heritage Museum, and I'm delighted to have with me writer and soldier and patriot John Crawley. John is going to discuss his book, which we have in the store. I'm just going to show you. It's The Yank. So it came in the other day, so you can order copies from us, or of course it is available at your local bookstore or those large online stores that we don't like to publicize, too much. He's going to discuss with us though his work and his life as a Marine, and then as someone who went back to Ireland and joined the IRA in, I suppose it really was kind of the height of the Troubles. So a very interesting life, John, you've had, and now you're at home in Ireland, in Clonus in County Monaghan.
Yes, thank you.
Good, so welcome, thank you for having us. So, I suppose, obviously this is going to be a kind of a frank conversation. You've had, as I say, an interesting life. Obviously some people won't agree with your choices and all the rest of that, but as this is not a kind of a got you moment. I'm very interested in your life as, an Irish American, as the diaspora. So we'll go back to the start and then kind of work our way up. John, tell us, you were born in America to Irish immigrant parents, am I right? And then you went back to Ireland as a teen.
Yes, I was born in Long Island, New York. My mother was an immigrant from Kerry, and my father was an immigrant from Roscommon. He was in the United States Air Force at the time, at an Air Force base in Long Island when I was born. He joined the Air Force to get technical training and to accelerate his American citizenship. But we left when I was 2 and moved to Chicago, so I don't remember New York at all. I basically grew up in Chicago and had a normal, Irish American, childhood.
Quite an Irish city, Chicago. With
very Irish. I mean, my parents were Irish. All their friends were Irish. Their relations were Irish, and a lot of the kids I went to school with, their parents were Irish. And I always heard Ireland referred to as home. When I grown up, Ireland was always home. But when I was 13, I came to Ireland for a summer with my father, and we traveled around for the summer, and I really loved it. I really took to it. And then a year later, when I was 14, I was asked would I be willing to move to Ireland for good, to go to school, because my dad wanted to come, what he called home. So I readily agreed. I mean, it was a big move for a 14-year-old to leave the country they're used to move to another country. But I just loved Ireland, and I suppose I had a bit of a sense of adventure, and I actually didn't mind doing it at all. So I moved to Roscommon, stayed with an aunt and her family for a year while my parents settled their American affairs, and I went to school in Castlereagh in Roscommon. And then we made the move to Dublin, and then I went to secondary school in Dublin.
So you were too late to learn Irish and everything, were you?
I was too late for Irish. I did my best to learn Irish later on in my life.
Of course.
But at the time, no, because I was over 12, I didn't have to. And I actually wanted to, but my mother thought it wasn't much use, the language. Even though her grandfather had been a fluent Irish speaker.
Imagine, but pockets of Kerry were, until living memory.
But I would have liked to, but so I didn't in school. I think at the time, if you were over 12, you didn't have to learn it.
That still is there. I think once you're 10 or something, you don't have to. And how was it? I mean, it's interesting. Your nickname, I think your code name of the IRA was the Yank as well. Did kids call you the Yank? Like, were you very conscious?
A little bit, maybe a little bit, but not. I don't remember it so much. And I talk about it in the book where I had a bit of a nickname, the Yank. It wasn't a code name; it was like a nickname.
Okay.
And I used to, well, I suppose that's a little bit maybe getting a bit ahead of myself, but I used to insist they don't call me that because I thought it identified me, but it was no use. They just
actually a good point.
Anyway. And whereas I wrote the book, and I wrote every word of the book myself, when I was talking to the American publisher and telling him that story, he just
go ahead, John. Sorry.
He just thought the Yank would be a good name for the book. So at first I wasn't too sure about that, but then I said, right, we'll go ahead. We'll call it that. Yeah.
And sorry, I'm just giving a thank you. It's any one of those. There's about 3 of them. Sorry. Okay, so you're back in Ireland. You don't feel, terribly out. And I suppose, as you said, you grew up in an Irish house, even though it was in America. So a lot of the, like I've talked to other Irish Americans and Irish immigrants who return home that, they played Irish Gaelic, even if it was only in the apartment, like their mom told them how to play football, so they would know those rules.
When I first went to school, even the teacher asked me, were my parents from Ireland, because the way I pronounced H, I said H instead of H, different things like that.
Yeah. And I have to say, your accent is quite Irish today. There's not a whole lot of Chicago
I've been
in there.
in Ireland almost all my life, really. So
yeah. And then you decided. Well, let me just ask you first. Did you have grandparents? Did you say at home? You moved.
Well, both my grandmothers had died before I knew them, so I had 2 grandfathers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you didn't stay in Roscommon with your dad's people. You came to Dublin.
No, I stayed in Roscommon with my dad's sister for a year.
Mm-hmm.
While my parents settled their American affairs, and then when they moved to Dublin, I moved in there with them.
Okay. And Dublin was maybe an easier transition from a city, to another city. Rather, Roscommon can be cold winters up there in Roscommon.
When I went to school in Loughlinstown in Dublin, I played rugby, and there was I had no Republican background at all. I had no I heard no Republican politics at home. My father would have been a Fianna Fáil family, and my mother would have been Fine Gael. But it was never discussed, I got my Republican beliefs based on my own study and things like that, and my own sympathies and my own natural, I think what played a large part of it was growing up in America, because in America, the United States is a republic. It's a very diverse society, countless communities, languages, and groups, but one national republic, e pluribus unum. And I didn't see why Ireland shouldn't have the same. Why Ireland, you have India, for example, 2.1 billion people, 2,000 ethnic groups, 15 official languages, but it's one republic. You have Ireland, half the population of London, 2 traditions, and we can't be one united republic. So, I thought that, and I think the main reason we can't be, or couldn't be at the time, and still can't be, is because a foreign government is in this country underwriting the supremacy of a minority faction. So, that's the conclusion I came to, and I thought that had to be resisted.
And can I ask you, John, because you decide quite quickly, I mean, as an 18-year-old, to come back to America and I think you say in the book, like, you deliberately joined the Marines knowing you wanted to bring that expertise home. You didn't want to be an American career soldier or, and so it was your kind of study of history at high school in Ireland, and your American background that kind of formed these ideas, so that by 18, you were a committed, Republican.
Well, I didn't know how committed I was at 18. I felt I was. But you don't really know how committed you are until you actually step up to the plate. And the thing about it is, I would have joined the IRA at 18, but I didn't know anybody in it. Like, it's not called a secret army for nothing. I mean, I lived in South County Dublin, in a middle-class area. There wasn't any really IRA support, and in fact, it was far the opposite, because all the propaganda and all that at the time was totally anti-Republican.
Yeah. Can I ask you, John? Actually, are we talking like early 70s?
We're talking we're talking mid 70s, 73, 74, 75 in Dublin. And then I joined the Marines in May 1975 when I turned 18.
Okay, yeah.
You see, I would have joined the IRA when I was 18, but I didn't know, as I said, I didn't know anybody in it. So I decided I'd go to America because I had American citizenship, get military training, get the best possible training I could. And there was 2 reasons for that. One was to test my commitment. I felt that if I went away for 4 years and I came back and I still wanted to join the IRA, then I was serious about it. That if I wasn't diverted by other career opportunities and other, distractions. And the other thing was to enhance my professional development. But I didn't join with a view to, learning the stuff and coming home and teaching the IRA anything, because I heard I was constantly heard, and mostly from the Brits, that the IRA was the most highly professional, highly trained organization, highly trained guerrillas in the world. So I didn't think the IRA, I mean, not for one second was I presumptuous enough to believe the IRA was waiting for me. You know what I mean? That was not what my agenda. Just like I said, to enhance my professional development and to come home and test my commitment, and then come home and join. And I got out of the Marines on the 29th of May 1979. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I was discharged. 2 o'clock that afternoon, I was in a plane home. I was on a connecting flight home to Ireland.
Wow. And so let's talk about the Marines. I mean, I have to say it's a kind of a nightmare, of mine, like these drill sergeants screaming in your face, and your description of your training is amazing in the book, that you make that mistake about asking for recon.
Yes. Well, it was a big mistake. You see, I originally wanted to join the Army Green Berets, the Army Special Forces, because my cousin Ken had been in them for 7 years.
Yeah.
And I went to an Army recruiter, and I can't remember exactly why I didn't sign the enlistment papers that day. I think I had to get a birth cert. There's something missing. So I had to come back to him in a few days. But I did sign the guarantee. So I signed guarantees. They would send me to Airborne, Ranger, and Special Forces training. Now, of course, there's no guarantee you would get past the training. The vast majority of people didn't, but the Army would guarantee to send you. In the meantime, my Uncle Mike from County Kerry, my granduncle Mike, he'd been in the US Navy in World War II, and he had a real reverence for the Marines. And he was, telling me, if you really want to be with the best, join the Marines. But I wanted to be like in a Special Forces unit. Didn't think the Marines had them. So anyway, to kind of keep them happy, and for a little bit of my own curiosity, I went to see a Marine recruiter and said, I think the Marines are good and all that, but I'd like to be in Special Forces, and you don't have that. And like right away he went into the spiel about Marine recon and the best Special Forces of all, the cream of the corps, the elite of the elite, and all this,
Yeah.
But the trouble is, the Marines wouldn't guarantee me recon. They would guarantee me infantry, and I would just have to take a chance I could get into it. So anyway, to make a long story short, obviously I joined the Marines, and then I went through boot camp. And you talk about the training at boot camp. At the time I went through, I don't know if you or any people listening have seen the movie Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
But that the drill instructor in there was a real drill instructor in the Marines, and that to me was the most realistic portrayal of Marine boot camp I've ever seen. I mean, from when I was in it, I have no idea what it's like now, But so I tried to get into recon. I was literally laughed at, and had a very difficult time. And I describe it in the book, but I finally got into recon, and I ended up in the 3rd Recon Battalion in Okinawa. And
when I read your the maggot and mouse, I was like, oh God, I wouldn't last a day. I would not last a day.
I know. It's they're. They wouldn't be the most sympathetic of people now.
But I wrote down, actually, you had a really good explanation, and I know there's a psychology behind breaking a person down and then building them back up, and I guess you sort like the leaders from the followers. Some people are brilliant at doing what they're told, like I probably am not. But so I thought it was really, they don't try to get people to quit, they try to get quitters to quit.
Well, that was
recon.
That was more in recon training.
Which is even more difficult to get.
It was sort of the Marine Special Forces, it was Special Operations Capable Unit. And when I went to the recon indoctrination program, which was 6 weeks of basic hell, that's what I learned later. I became a recon instructor myself later, and that's what I was told. So you can get anybody to quit anything. I mean, you can if you press somebody. But the way it's pretty. It seems chaotic. It seems crazy. It seems mad. But it's actually very well thought out, very well thought through, to test people and and all this. And and that was basically it. I remember a recon instructor saying to me that this isn't designed to get people to quit. It's designed to get quitters to quit.
Yeah.
Which I thought was
I suppose when you're in the jungle somewhere, or in a tightly, and because you talk too about like how they do the formation when they're running, like they tap you in back, I'm going, and now you're taking the fire from behind. You have to have someone who knows what they're doing, like, and who's not going to freak out, or so it's probably better that the quitters quit, for everyone.
Well, you have to your life can rely on the people around you.
And we'll kind of skip a tiny bit just because while we're on this subject. You talk about when you were recruited into the IRA, reading the Green Book, and I've read sections of that. I think it was published in one of the history books, by why the name always escapes me, and I've met him.
Dave Warrior, was it?
Yeah, Tim Pat Coogan's book.
Tim Pat Coogan, it's been in a few books. Yeah.
So he you know, did that training help you to withstand later on, if there was training with the IRA, or even, you know, to be honest, like from the British Army when they're interrogating you, like, did those skills transfer, you know?
Well, not so much an interrogation, all, but I found later on, for example, when, you know, British Army helicopters were scouring the countryside, I'd been in helicopters countless times, and I knew what a helicopter pilot could see. You know, I've been in them so many times, so I knew that the main thing that they would look for was movement, you know, things like that. So I had a good idea. I mean, whereas the other IRA guys I've been with, they had never been in a helicopter.
I
knew nothing about helicopters, you know, and sometimes they would exaggerate their effectiveness and things like that. But no, there were certain tactics, techniques, and procedures that did see me through. But a lot of the training wasn't really transferable. It was a totally different type of war.
Okay.
We were being trained to fight, you know.
But
the thing about recon, sorry to cut across you there, but the thing about recon, you see, it wasn't just like an infantry thing where you fix bayonets and charge. I mean, we were trained to work in small teams behind enemy lines with very little support, very little air support, very little artillery. So in a way, that was like the IRA, small teams behind the lines with very little support, and, you know, relying on your own initiative. You know, so you know, there were similarities.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the Marines, you were posted overseas in the late 70s. I think you said you left in 79.
76, 77, Okinawa, 3rd Marine Division. And I went to scuba school in the Philippines. And we were in Australia, and, you know, it was real good. I was in, you know, what they call the Fleet Marine Force. And when I left there, I wanted to go to the 2nd Force Reconnaissance Company at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which was, you know, which would have, you know, been a fantastic move for me. But they were looking for instructors at the Marine Amphibious Reconnaissance School at Little Creek, Virginia. And because I was qualified, I ended up as an instructor at Little Creek, which was good too, because I learned a lot about, you know,
training and teaching, like, and And again, I know it's not exactly related, but have you been following the SEALs? I think kind of got into trouble with that BUDS training because it's supposedly so barbaric. You know, people die on the train.
Well,
was your training that intense?
Training, well, people sometimes die in training because it has to be realistic, you know. And, you know, we had people unfortunately drown or hypothermia. You know, accidents happen. But there is a big emphasis placed on safety, you know.
But at the same time, you can't really train them.
You know, you're parachuting, you're jumping out of helicopters, you know, things go wrong sometimes.
And you have to learn by doing. Like, you can't really read that in a book, like, and go out to war happy, you know. Like,
it's you have to do it. You have to do it, you know, and you have to do it as a team. You know, you have to be a cohesive team. I think one of the difficulties I had with the IRA later on in training was the IRA didn't really train as teams, didn't really train as a unit. So the small unit cohesion, which is so essential to success in combat, was almost entirely missing with the IRA. Because the IRA had difficulties too that, you know, a normal army wouldn't have. For example, the IRA couldn't really go out and rehearse because it would flag up, you know, rehearse operations because it would flag up, you know, something was happening, things like that. So, you know, it was quite different in a lot of ways, you know. But, some of the same factors still apply. I mean, for example, you know, for example, in marksmanship, physics is physics, ballistics are ballistics, whether you're in the Marines or in the IRA, it's the same, like, you know. So some things are sort of transferable and others aren't.
So when you came back, there's obviously no split in the IRA in 79, right? So you just joined the IRA. There's no provisional or anything else.
The provisional IRA.
Okay,
It would have been in May 1980 by the time I got it. As you see, I still didn't know nobody in the IRA when I came home. I still knew nobody. I didn't know if I'd be able to get into it, you know, and I didn't know if they would accept me. I mean, he was an ex-US Marine, you know, who was I? You know, coming out of the blue, like.
And like, you're going around looking, does anyone know someone I can talk to? You know,
But eventually, it's a bit of a convoluted process. But eventually, I got a job with a guy that I knew had been in Portlaoise prison as a Republican prisoner, and you know, I kind of latched onto him, and I'd say within about 3 days of my line of questioning, he knew that I wanted.
So you were serious.
He actually tried to talk me out of it. He had left himself, and he you know, he told me straight out, look, you're going to end up dead or in prison, you know. And but you know, he must have said it to somebody, because eventually a fellow from County Tyrone approached me, who was in the IRA, although he didn't tell me that at the time.
Yeah.
And, I got the green book, as they say, and lectures, a bit of investigations and things like that went on. So, but I mean, clearly and obviously, I was eventually sworn in as a volunteer.
And so then you did a little bit of kind of reconnoitering type stuff. I thought it was actually quite a humorous scene in the book where you talk about, we just mentioned ballistics, like you're trying to explain to the guy, well, he can put on a suppressor, you know, like, I said, oh no, well, sure, it slows the speed of the bullet. You're like, oh, armies around the world don't know what they're doing.
I found a lot of that. And where I wasn't surprised about that. I mean, because very few people have been professionally trained. And but they were very keen to learn. But what did surprise me was at a leadership level, there seemed to be no respect really for training, or no real emphasis put on training. In the Marines, I mean, the Marines look on almost on war as something that you do in between training sessions. You know, training is so important; it's everything.
Yeah, drilling is everything.
I mean, I heard two different members of the IRA Army Council say that you could train a monkey to shoot, which is just, you know, I just that to me was a massive culture shock, that they didn't respect training in that way. And that percolated, you know, down to our effectiveness on the ground, you know.
Yeah.
But at a ground level, now the active service level, as we would call it, no, I found lads were very keen to learn and very you see, like I said, I didn't join the IRA with a view to improving the IRA. I didn't think they needed improvement. And like I said, I certainly didn't think the IRA were sitting around waiting for me to come along. I never thought that. It was only when I joined that I seen that there were a lot of issues. And what frustrated me is they could have been so easily resolved. So many issues. But like, as I say in the book, you know, we had people in the British Army, had been in the Irish Army. Some of them had been in elite units. We had school teachers who could write lesson plans, devise course structure. We had very capable artists who could design formative training aids. But you know, instead of doing a skills audit and putting that together, so I looked at it as, you know, as managerial incompetence at a leadership level, and in some cases I suspected maybe almost sabotage. For some reason they didn't want to. You know, that was my. They would deny that, of course. You know, of course. That was my suspicion. And then I was starting to make my views known. And then one day, out of the blue, I was told to go to the States and buy guns because I had an American accent. And I was very taken aback by this, because I thought I had more to contribute to the IRA than my accent. And also, there's plenty of people in the States with American accents who could have, you know,
who could have done that bit.
Go to a gun store and, you know, tell them what to buy, and they buy it, you know. So I was very taken aback by that, and I wasn't keen on that idea at all. But you know, I was given orders and I had to go. So,
do you think it was to get you out of, you know, from under them, or you were?
There's a few people there that I do believe were glad to see the back of me. You know, didn't want to hear criticism and didn't want to hear anything. No, there were a few. I honestly believe that. But at the same time, I don't want to overemphasize my importance or anything like that. You know what I mean? I wasn't, you know, the area wasn't going to collapse without me either. You know what I mean? But there were resolvable issues that could have been resolved, and I think they should have been. And I was very frustrated that wasn't allowed to happen.
Did you read Patrick Radden Keefe's book, Say Nothing?
I did, yeah.
Like, I think that's kind of one of the recurring themes too, maybe, is that there is not great communication, you know, amongst people, and there isn't, and I mean, the IRA is fighting this way since, you know, 1920 or 1919. You know, like, you have those cells, the flying columns, they're kind of independent of each other, but there is a sort of a breakdown, I think, that happens when there isn't a centralized, you know, intelligence and a centralized plan, and you know.
Well, in some ways that's true. In other ways, you know, you see, it was supposed to be a cell system. But at the same time, there were departments there, like the Northern Command and the Security Department and all, who could go to any area and do investigations if something went wrong in that. But you know, years later, we found out that the head of security, Scappaticci, was a British agent. So even though, I mean, the Brits must have really been sitting back and laughing, because, you know, even though you had these supposed to be semi-autonomous units, you know, for security reasons, Scappaticci could come in and ask questions and find out who was on this job, who did this, who did that, you know, an investigation of someone wrong, and he's reporting everything back to the British. You know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
There were a lot of problems. Like, of course, we didn't know that at the time.
I
And I
know.
often say that we were, we were broken in small units, and sometimes there wasn't great communication. Yes, but I believe, looking back on it, that the people that had the real overall picture of the IRA was British intelligence.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that they had the big picture the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of shocking when you think,
Yeah.
Because that makes you a sitting duck, really. Like if you're rank and file, further
does.
down. Yeah.
It does. And the thing about it is, you see they can manipulate the situation. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a journalist one day, and he was telling me he was talking to a member of the British FRU, Force Research Unit, which was British Army Intelligence Unit. The way he described it to them is, he says, you say you get the IRAs and say loyalists or the Brits on the other side of a table, and they're playing chess. He says they turn off the lights, and the British intelligence fella, he has on the night vision goggles, and he comes over and he moves all the chess pieces, and then he leaves the room and he turns the light back on. And so this is how they're able to,
game is played without you, like.
And see what they do is that, the Brits want to promote certain people. Look, of 196 countries in the world, the British have either invaded or had a military presence at some stage in 171 of them. They're absolute experts at dealing with insurgencies. I mean, their empire and everything. I would never underestimate them. They're very, very good. And what they want to do is, when they're psychologically profiling a movement, they want to know who's absolutely committed to the ideology and who is maybe using it as a mobilizing aspiration around which someday maybe to build a career, who is totally determined to win the struggle, and who is more determined to survive the struggle. And when they determine that, then they know who to take out. So they have to basically what they do, and they do it over 20 or 30 years, is they kill the right people, they jail the right people, and they buy the right people.
Yeah.
So,
so it's a war on many fronts,
on all fronts. Yeah, definitely. And, we were a small guerrilla organization. The life of an IRA volunteer was a life of hardship and poverty. Never had money, never had this, never had that. And whereas the British intelligence officer, he could sit back. He's on a wage. He's on a pension. He could sit back. He can play the long game. Whereas we're on the field, we're on the ground. We have no money, no prospects, basically trying to stay alive week to week and stay out of prison. So the Brits are in a much, much better position, or any state apparatus is in a much better position to play the long game. And that's what they do. Yeah.
And I think, you're so right in a way too about, I mean, I grew up in the Troubles, but in the South, obviously, not really touched at all. Although, my town, there's plenty of sympathizers, and, every now and then there'd be houses raided and that. But while you were talking, I was thinking about Patrick Radden Keefe's book, and, some of the work that's been done now on Bobby Sands and stuff. And, there's many reasons why people join the IRA, and some of them are not out of deep ideology, or, political. Some of them, they're young men with no prospects, and they kind of drift into it. I remember talking to Colin Broderick one time a couple of years ago, and he said, you kind of wake up one day and you're driving a car for some guy, and you don't know how you got there, because you were at 14, you were looking around the corner, and now,
Maybe to an extent, but I mean, most of the people I met were quite committed. I mean, you look at the hunger strikes, there was 12 men day strike, 10 the blocks and 2 in England. And, so that level of utter commitment was there too. You know what I mean? I've seen enormous acts of heroism that would have won the Medal of Honor.
In any other fight.
This all has to go to, this is all lost to history because we were a secret army and these things can't be made public. But you see, I think, in fairness to the IRA, I think they were pretty careful. During the hunger strikes, I know there was a moratorium placed on IRA recruitment because they didn't want people joining out of emotion or out of a sense of revenge. Because you got to be very careful about people joining a guerrilla organization out of a sense of revenge or something like that. Because that's something, they do 1 or 2 operations, they get out of their system, and now they're pulled into a barracks, and all of a sudden they find, oh my God,
I'm off my depth here.
It's the wrong reason to fight. You have to have your best volunteers are people who are personally brave, but also have are politically educated to why they're fighting. That's your best volunteer, and that's the greatest enemy that the British have in Ireland.
And that's what you said in your book, that you were
Republican.
You said I was prepared to risk my life for a political goal. That it's not extreme, when you put it that way. It's not extreme.
Well, I sometimes joke to me that an extreme Republican would want a 33 county Ireland with England the 33rd county and London, a London renamed Derry London. You know what I mean? Maybe that's extreme, but I mean, this thing. How was it 32? Ireland is 32 counties. How was the 32 county national republic? Within an all-Ireland republic, a national democracy within an all-Ireland republic, that is not extreme. That should be our basic demand. That should be our bottom line. A 32-county national republic, national democracy within an all-Ireland republic. That to me should be the bottom line, not an extreme goal. I certainly don't see it as an extreme goal. And this is something that's very, very important to bear in mind. There would never have been violence in Ireland of any description if Britain had respected the democratic wishes of the Irish people. They invaded Ireland. They planted Ireland. They claimed Ireland. They manipulate the situation across the board. And I remember the British Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. I don't like using the term Northern Ireland, but I sometimes do to audiences because I don't want to, sometimes people
muddy the waters.
The nuance there. But the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland in the early 90s, Peter Brook, said that the British government wasn't against the concept of a sovereign all-Ireland republic. He says they were against its violent expression. But in 1918, there was a peaceful democratic election across the 32 counties, and there was no violence. And the people voted overwhelmingly for an all-Ireland republic. Sinn Féin won 76% of the vote at that time, and their manifesto was clearly stated. They supported the 1916 Rising, and they supported the establishment of a 32-county Dáil Éireann. And Britain answered that with partition and the Black and Tans.
Well, I mean, technically, partition had probably happened in 1912 with the Home Rule Bill being passed.
Well, to an extent, it came in 1920, but you see,
officially,
it was legalized in 1920 under the Government Ireland Act. But the thing about it is, the thing about partition is, there's a narrative in the South that Ireland won its freedom and they beat the Brits and all. Well, first of all, I mean, part of Ireland got a degree of freedom, but if you look at it for the Brits, they got Ireland off their back. They kept the 6 counties, and at the time, the 6 counties had something like 93-94% of Ireland's industrial manufacturing base. And the 26 was a rural backwater that the British fully expected would supply them with agricultural goods and soldiers into the foreseeable future. So the British looked at it very much as a win. And it's very important to remember too that the British manipulated the whole thing. They played what they call the orange card. When the Home Rule thing came out, they openly played what they call the orange card, whipping up Unionist frenzy in the North about you're going to be stuck with this Catholic priest-ridden Home Rule and all this. So,
and to be honest, Carson and Craig didn't need that to be like Carson and Craig didn't need to be told that by the British. They were very conscious of that fear, in Ulster themselves. They were. I think we sometimes forget how powerful those Ulster Unionists were in that early 20th century period. It wasn't all Randolph Churchill.
But one of the reasons they were powerful is because their minority position was underwritten by the British government. I mean, you have to remember that violence, basically, 20th century violence in Ireland was introduced in Ireland in the 1912 Larne gun running when the
Unionists
armed the Unionists, and when nationalists brought in arms,
they were shot at.
They were shot at, shot down on Bachelor's Walk. So that wasn't lost on people at the time. But the thing about it is, the Unionist position isn't some unassailable position that's there because they've won some moral or political argument. They're underwritten by the British government. The British government backs them, and that's the trouble. And yet, they're 18% of the population of Ireland, but they're 2% of the population of the UK, and yet they're able to say no to everybody all the time.
I know. Well, and John, is that kind of, Brexit is such a debacle now, and this, I think if anything should have maybe shown the Unionists how little England actually thinks about them, was the Brexit vote and then all of these protocols. Like when you do a word cloud of the debates coming up to Brexit in England, nobody mentioned Northern Ireland. Like, or the Good Friday
Agreement.
Agreement.
Isn't on the radar in England at all. It's just not on the radar.
Yeah.
And
they're gearing up for elections now again, right? Because
yes.
And what do you think will happen there? Like, obviously Sinn Féin, we know now, like the Catholics are the biggest majority, in the census for the first time in the state. Sinn Féin will probably retain maybe their, lead in the polls. Are the DUP going to still be a factor, do you think, in these elections, or is it really? I
think it'll be a factor, but see, the North North is just a toxic sectarian. It's an artificial entity. Everything there is a sectarian zero-sum game.
Right.
I mean, I know people who would disagree with a lot of Sinn Féin policy, but vote Sinn Féin because they say if we don't, unions will get in. And unions are the same.
And vice versa.
So what the Good Friday Agreement and Stormont and all have done, they've really intensified sectarianism. I mean, there's far more peace walls now. 25 years into the ceasefire, or however long, than there was when the troubles were on the go. You know what I mean? So it's a very it's a very toxic situation. It's very sectarian, and it's just,
and there is no middle ground politically out there. Like you are pushed to either fringe.
In times of crisis, sure. And the thing about it is, I think it's just further evidence of why whenever any part of Ireland is run by a British jurisdiction, it just never works. It just never works. You know what I mean? I mean, my ultimate goal as a Republican would be to see the end of the connection with Britain and the British jurisdiction in Ireland, and for us to eventually build a joint civic identity. I mean, Irish republicanism was begun by Protestants. The United Irishmen in 1791 were founded by 28 Protestants, 26 of them Northern Presbyterians. You see, they were Protestants who were motivated by the Enlightenment, not Protestants motivated by plantation supremacy. And, what did the United Irishmen mean when they talked about United Ireland? Ireland wasn't partitioned in 1791. They meant uniting as citizens. There's a little bit, I think sometimes there's too much talk that's come about United Ireland instead of about a republic. Like, we weren't the United Ireland Army, we were the Republican Army. And the United Ireland, if it was only about ending partition, then what was 1916 Rising about? There was no partition in 1916. You know what I mean?
But see, there was, like, it had been under the 1912 Home Rule Act, that state was absolutely going to become an entity, because the Home Rule was pushed up until 1914, and then the war. So then, like, the House of Lords they could only postpone it, they couldn't veto it. And by the time 1916 happens, there is absolutely, they say it, like, there will have to be provision made for the North. So long before the War of Independence.
The British said it, Elizabeth.
The British, of course, the British, but they're the government,
This is British legislation, and the British are on the side they wanted army. It was the interference of a foreign government in this country, that's behind all this.
I know, but John, like, the reality is they were the government of the country, like foreign or otherwise, they governed the island.
Yeah, but you see, people like me disagree with that. That's why we have war.
Oh no, like, it's it's no problem to disagree, but that's kind of semantics, because the thing is, the government, whether we agree with them or not.
I disagree. It's not semantics. Yes, they were the illegal government of Ireland. Yes, they were, and yes, they carried out the laws. But you see, when the debates came up about even home rule, Lloyd George, people like that, they said Ireland will not be. The 1918 election, even the 19 election came up, they said Ireland will not be an independent sovereign state. They ruled that out. So the Irish people had no say. It didn't matter what the Irish people voted for or what majority. I think,
but most people couldn't vote. This is very. I absolutely agree with you, and I'm not saying that it's wrong that it happened, but like the political reality at the time was not everybody could vote. We were ruled by England, and. So it's whether it was legitimate or not, I think is an argument that comes in afterwards, because there was no alternative. That was the reality.
I don't agree. There's no alternative. I mean, there was not a partitionist mindset before partition. There simply wasn't. I mean, if you read the papers at the time, a postmaster in Kilkenny might be transferred to the post office in Enniskillen. Things like that. That partitionist mindset that came in after partition. You see, there's a partitionist mindset because of partition, and there's unionist mindset because of the union. But to paraphrase, the first Italian Prime Minister, Adorno, he said, when Italy was just a bunch of city-states, it had no sense of its nationhood. He said, first we have to make Italy, then we can make Italians. And the same thing in Ireland. I don't believe we'll ever have a genuine Irish Republican ethos until we have a 32-county Irish Republic. And the Brits are always working so that doesn't happen, because Ireland is still a very important strategic asset to them. It's on their western flank. Sometimes Irish people, and I hear English people all the time saying they'd love to be rid of it, and that's true. But the British, for the most part, but the British intelligence and security services are not going to just leave Ireland and shut the door behind them. They are going to try to ensure that any future political settlement in Ireland is to their strategic advantage. And their number one basis for achieving that is division among the Irish people, because divide and rule is how they built an empire. And what they want to do is to make the Irish themselves, as much as possible, accomplices in their own national division, to say that this is legitimate, that this is the only way. And that's what Republicans have to struggle against all the time.
Well, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just saying, that it's very difficult, I think, to fight of what should have been, when the players at the time were dealing with the actual political reality, of where they're. And so when you talk about the 1918 election, the Unionists won up there, Sinn Féin had to play a blinder.
But I mean, that's like saying, there's more Polish spoken in Ireland than there is Irish. So if the Polish had took 2 or 3 counties in Ireland and voted they want to be part of Poland, does that, we take a national view of the national question, Elizabeth. We're Republicans. We don't take a partitionist view. And also, even in the early 60s, I know it's way after the fact, but the UN brought a thing that that's more or less a war crime to invade a country, plant it, and change its national character. That's not a legitimate thing to do.
700 years too late for us.
I know, it is. But I mean, we got to look at the British strategy here. When they planted Ireland, at the time they openly said we're going to make Ireland. First, it was to make Ireland English, and then later on to make Ireland British. And I mean, the Elizabethan planter Edmund Spencer, based in Waterford, he says in 1585, I think it was, he wrote to Queen Elizabeth in total confidence. He says the Irishman will in turn quite learn to forget his Irish nation. And so they want, the Brits always wanted to undermine our sense of nationhood. You know what I mean?
Go ahead. No.
No, well, home rule was a glorified council. The Irish people had basic control of nothing except painting the post office screen, post box, something like that. No control, no army, no control of defense, no control of foreign relations, customs, coin, taxation, nothing. So I mean, the bottom line for an Irish Republican is basically does Irish constitutional authority reside with the Irish people, or does it not? If a foreign government can make your laws, if a foreign government can have police services and constables that you recognize as legitimate authority, that is simply not a Republican position. It's a position, but it's not a Republican position.
Well, no, and I mean, this is where we're at today, that talks of reunification and everything are still very complex, because even those who nominally want a united Ireland, may not envision it the way a Republican envisions it, or the way even Unionists who might feel sort of adrift from England, and you're trying to welcome them in by compromise. It's a difficult situation, I think, for the counties to try to accommodate each other.
But you see, but what's the compromise like? I mean, is the compromise that we maintain a sectarian dynamic into perpetuity, that we maintain the British-Irish cleavage? I mean, when Martin McGuinness shook hands with the Queen of England, I mean, I spent my life as a Republican, risked my life, prison, and so did so many men around me to break the connection with England. And he's there shaking her hand and saying, you have a role here, you have a legitimacy here, and you have a role to play in the future. Crown. That is the polar opposite of what we were fighting for. We were fighting to break that connection. and to build our own national independence. And I'm not blind to the fact, and I clearly know that there is a minority in Ireland who do not want Ireland to be a free and independent country. The same in the United States. 1/3 of American colonists during the American Revolution supported the crown. 25,000 Americans fought against George Washington. They joined the Royal American Rifles, the Queen's American Rangers. I mean, should American be partitioned then? Should they have got 4 or 5 counties and Britain continue to rule? I mean, at some stage, we have to break that connection with England, because every single thing that we're talking about, whether it's Brexit, whatever, has a root cause in their jurisdiction in this country. It's the cause of all the problems. Unless people take the view that Republicans are the cause of the problem because they resist that. So I suppose if people could roll over and never lift a finger in their own defense, and that you could call that peace or pacification, I suppose, but it's not something I would agree with. And I don't believe the Irish were ever the aggressors here, ever. Things went wrong. The IRA did things, and that nobody could stand over. Unfortunate things happened in the past. But the root cause of violence in this country is the British presence, and coming as an IRA volunteer and knowing myself the way the British intelligence services and the Irish Special Branch operated loyalist death squads, ran the whole dirty war, it was a stinking, filthy mess, and it's something that has to be resolved at some stage, and I think the only way we can resolve it is by our independence, our complete total independence.
But John, this is I don't have an opinion on this. Did you think Martin McGuinness, by shaking her hand, was acknowledging that she had a role, or was it just acknowledging her as a head of state, that he, as a representative of another state, would be trying to negotiate with? And
Elizabeth, he wasn't a representative of another state. He was a member of Stormont, which is a small offshoot of the Westminster Parliament, right? The devolved Parliament under British law, and the British must approve every law that Stormont passes. No, he was acknowledging her, and he was saying to the base, to the Sinn Féin base, and to the world, that you have a role to play here. And here's the crux of it. What it was really doing was turning around and saying something that no Republican has ever said in their history, that Unionists are the British presence. Unionists are the British presence. That's what that's saying. And because of their British presence and their Britishness has to be respected, you have a role to play here. Now, never in our history did we acknowledge that, because Unionists, up until 1885, Unionists always called themselves Irish. Maybe Royal Irish and things like that. Ulster Presbyterians were at the forefront of republicanism. And here's another thing too. It's very important to remember. So much, this sacred Britishness that they feel is actually conditional. The Orange Order was founded in 1795 on condition that the king or queen was a Protestant. That's in their constitution. And time again, Unionists have pledged loyalty to the crown as long as the crown is Protestant. And under the Act of Settlement that's still in effect in England, the head of the UK state cannot be a Catholic, and up until about 10 years ago, couldn't marry a Catholic. So the British state itself is a sectarian state, and it has brought this sectarianism into our country. It's brought this. That's what the sectarian. The Irish people themselves aren't naturally sectarian people. It was brought into this country. They made Catholics outlaws, and they made Protestantism the cleavage around which they gave patronage and preferences to. The Protestant ascendancy and all that. So it's not a religious thing. You're well aware it's not a religious thing. It's where does your loyalty lie? Do you believe constitutional authority resides in Ireland, or do you believe it resides in the Crown of England? And of course, Republicans have only one answer for that. But
well, until McGuinness's answer.
Well, McGuinness. There's a long stories to come out there yet. But the thing about it is, never in our history did we ever say that Unionists in Ireland were the British presence. That's never happened before. So this is a massive but I look at it as a massive counterinsurgency victory for the British, because it almost says to the British, you have a role here. You have a role in Ireland because you have to protect your people. And if you look at the future United Ireland that they talk about in the Good Friday Agreement, you can be British or Irish in the so-called United Ireland. But that's not a United Ireland. You're not united if 18% of your population can give loyalty to a foreign power. I mean, so, and I'm not saying that if the British left and really did leave, that Unionists would overnight say, "Oh, I'm Irish," or "I give my loyalty to Ireland." We'd have to deal with that ourselves. But I believe we can deal with it between ourselves. But if you look at Irish history, Irish republicanism was founded exclusively by Protestants, right? 1803 Rising, Robert Emmet, a Protestant. The Fenians were founded. Half of them were Protestant, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and Thomas Clark Louis, a Protestant, wrote the Oath of the Republic, and it was a Protestant who wrote A Nation Once Again. So Protestants, Republicans, and Protestant nationalists have played a very strong role. So this notion that a Protestant has to be British or can't be Irish is it's actually a sectarian notion in itself. But the main cause I see. Sorry to cut across you there. My last point I'll make is the main reason is when you have a foreign power, fifth or sixth largest, most powerful country in the world, in here manipulating the situation with their intelligence services and the security services, constantly manipulating the situation to suit them, you're going to have these problems.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. I mean, what is the way forward then? Because if technically republicanism is that, we shouldn't really even compromise because it's a foreign entity and so they just need to get out. What does that do to the pretty sizable minority in the North who still somehow identify with them? How can there be a united Ireland peacefully?
Well, what happened to the sizable minority of Protestants in the 26 counties? I mean, there was a sizable Unionist population in the South. In fact,
but a lot of those left.
No, but nobody's asking anybody to leave. But that's up to them. I mean, if somebody cannot give loyalty to their country, I mean, that's up to them. But I think they'd be very welcome. And I am not a sectarian person. Absolutely. I mean, to me, it's a political issue. But what in every colonial situation when you're decolonizing, there is a substantial amount of people who want to maintain the old order. So what do? Do we not decolonize anywhere in the world because there's a minority wants to stay part, wants to maintain their privileged position? Do you know what I mean? I don't want to see anybody leave their home. I mean, I would never advocate that. But I also not going to say we're going to make Ireland Britain to make you feel more comfortable. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, I mean that's understandable and acceptable, but like when you look at it that way, then decolonization has not happened peacefully anywhere. Like South Africa, still a bit of a mess. Israel, still a mess.
But the colonial powers won't let it happen peacefully. Ireland didn't invade England. Ireland didn't partition England. Ireland didn't plant England.
It did invite Strongbow in, mind you, but Irish chieftains did invite Strongbow in. But
well, I mean, I know, but I mean.
So to backtrack a tiny bit, and then we'll open it for questions to the audience. Tell me about you mentioned the hunger strikes and stuff. How did and that the IRA sent you back to America? Just very briefly, how did you find working in America for the IRA? And of course, you crossed paths with Whitey Bulger, and how much of that can you talk about?
Oh well, I talk about it in the book, but I mean, like when I met him, he was Jim Bulger. I mean, with all the movies and books about him, there was no movies or books about him when I met him. I'd never been in Boston. I knew he was a criminal, and because he was able to get his guns and false ID and that. But I didn't know the stuff we know now, some of the nefarious activities he was at. I mean, he didn't tell us that stuff. He never told us that. He wanted us to sort of respect him in that. He sure as hell wasn't going to tell us that stuff,
Right.
And
another double agent, of course, he's.
Well, he was, but I think a lot of people at the top of a lot of organizations, double agents, you'll find, some lead amazingly lucky lives. But but I don't believe he informed us or anything like that.
Okay.
That came from Ireland, definitely, because when we were caught on the Marina Ann off the coast of Kerry, me and nobody in the American end knew we were going to Kerry.
Mm.
Yeah, we were to meet a ship 200 miles off the coast. We had a longitude and latitude. I had no idea, and nobody in American. We could have been going to Sligo, Galway. I had no notion. I didn't know that we were going out to meet us to Marina Ann, and I didn't know anybody on the Marina Ann. Nobody. And but the Irish Navy was waiting for us. They knew where we were going.
Okay.
You know? So it definitely came from the Irish end, you know.
And then what happened here? The boat is, you know, caught. It's Roger Casement all over again, kind of thing. And
well, I got 10 years in prison, and
where did you serve, John, again?
In Portlaoise prison.
Portlaoise, yeah.
And then I got an extra 3 years for attempted escape in '85. We very nearly got out. The last gate, the gate buckled on us, so I had 13 years, but remission, it ended up 10. So I went in September '84 and came out in September '94. I did a full 10.
Okay, yeah.
September '94, I got out 10 days after the ceasefire, the first ceasefire.
Right.
So, you know, things were in a state of flux. We didn't know what was going on. You know, all this stuff was going on. Talks, we basically on the ground didn't know what was happening. So we had to keep preparing in case the ceasefire broke down. So it did break down, and I found myself then in active service in England. And we were going to carry out an operation against the electricity grid to do financial and economic cost to the British government for their role here. And we were caught on that. I suspect we were informed on. And I got another 35 years.
Oh.
So yeah, I got 35 years for that. So, but eventually I got out under the Good Friday Agreement, which, I mean, when I got the 35 years, I didn't know we were going to get out. I thought I was doing 35 years, you know, I had no idea we'd get out again. But
God, you'd still be in, like, technically.
I would still be in, yeah. I'd still be in, yeah. And so I would have spent.
Would that have been prison in England at that point? Probably.
In England, yeah. It was a tough place to do prison in England too, because
I'd say so.
A lot of the prison officers now, they don't like Irish people, and a lot of them were ex-British soldiers and things like that, you know.
Yeah.
Hostile to you, but so eventually I
you got out under the Good Friday.
Under the Good Friday Agreement, yeah. Again, we didn't know what was going on. We were told this would lead to Republican goals and things like that, but I eventually left in 2007 when they Sinn Féin recognised lawful authority of a British constabulary in Ireland. I mean, it's just abrogated every Republican principle I ever held, and many of us felt the same. But look, they went down a different path, and you know, career paths were open up for people, and you know, it was like the Civil War. All of a sudden, you know, people could get careers, people could get this and that, and you know that the shiny objects attract a lot of people. You know.
So, do you feel very, like, aside from the political philosophy, you know, behind your republicanism, do you feel like kind of personally betrayed with what has happened to you? Like, you've done time, you risked your life. A lot of people are kind of cushy numbers now, maybe.
I don't really feel personally betrayed. You know, I don't. I tend to look outward.
Okay.
I tend to look outward at the big political picture, and I, you know, as I sometimes say, like, I joined the IRA when I was young and idealistic. Now I'm old and idealistic, but I feel as inspired today about the concept of an Irish Republic as I ever did, and I have a great faith in the British government to always screw things up in the end. They always seem to do. And if you look, I mean, and it's very important to remember, people need to be very careful here, because the Brits play the long game, and they're not stupid. They know that there's a Unionist majority now in only 2 of the 6 counties, and they know that's dropping all the time. And I have no doubt that nobody is planning harder for a future United Ireland and how that will be shaped than the British government. The British government are planning how that will happen. A lot of this stuff about United Ireland, how it looks, a lot of it's coming from British universities. I mean, that stuff isn't coming from the Irish government, like, you know what I mean? You know,
you mean talk of replacing the flag and the
all that stuff's coming from British thing. And here's the thing: this is where it plays in for the Brits very well. The British didn't bring in partition, no matter what people believe, because you know, if you read what they said at the time, they didn't bring in partition to protect the democratic right of Unionists. They brought in partition to deny the democratic right of Ireland as a whole, the national self-determination. So they can maintain the sectarian dynamic here, and that's how they maintain control. That's how they've always controlled Ireland. And anybody who thinks the Brits are here to protect Unionists would want to remember that England was in Ireland hundreds of years before the plantations. There was no Unionists here then. So what's their excuse then? They're here because it's a major strategic asset to them. They didn't want France or Spain landing in here, and then all these things, right? And it was also at the time a very rich country with land and things like that. So you know, the Brits always try to give you these altruistic reasons why they're here, but you know, the reality of it is they're suiting themselves. And the thing about it is, this United Ireland they're talking about, that retains the British Irish cleavage and all, if it came to pass, you know, people are talking about now, even Sinn Féin are talking about now rejoining the, you know, at one stage they definitely were talking about rejoining the British Commonwealth. Maybe changing the flag, changing the anthem, almost. And by accepting that the Unionist population or the British presence, it accepts the British role in Ireland. So it's a real win-win for the Brits, because what they can do now is, instead of having a 6-county enclave where there's constant war, they could have a 32 counties more or less at peace, but acknowledging its debt to Britain and what it owes Britain. You know what I mean? And that the royal family has a role to play here, and the Brits could come back in tomorrow to say, well, we're in to protect the British population of Ireland, which the Irish people themselves have acknowledged is the case. So we're actually, you know, this is an Irish democratic mandate. I know, you know, it's very complicated, and but it's to really, people need to drill into this to really look at what, you know, what's happening, what the Brits are saying, and their long history of from 1886, basically the first Home Rule Act. It's been to reconcile Irish nationalism with British sovereignty, right? And they can do it. And they've often reconciled Irish nationalism and British sovereignty. They've done it time and again with O'Connell. They've done it with the Rebendites. They've done it with the Free State. The Free State totally recognizes their legitimacy in the 6 counties and all that. But they can't reconcile it with a Republican. They can't reconcile a Republican to it. But we're a very, very small minority in this country, and we don't really have the power to really do much anything about it, except maybe just continue to make the arguments and press home the total belief in the full freedom and independence of Ireland, you know, without any British interference whatsoever. But,
just as you say, very difficult to get to that, you know, even unconsciously, like there's biases and
It is, but the thing is, you know, you were saying about the Unionists, what do you do with them? I mean, they put them here. They put them here so we would have this problem today. And I mean, they were put here as a dagger aimed at the heart of our national cohesion. You know, and that's the role they play. They see themselves as English garrison. You see, they are absolutely and totally a distinct community. They want to be a unique community. And in a republic, everybody's equal under the law. You can't have unique communities above the law in a republic. But like in America, look at all this. You got Italians, Irish, African American. You have Spanish. You have endless distinct communities in America. Endless cultures. But you're one republic.
Yeah. Although, John, you know, you could argue, I suppose, that America is becoming more and more pushed to its fringes too. You know, it's becoming difficult to maintain that multitude, I think, in American politics at the moment.
It is, and you know, the reality of it is, the Americans had to kill Americans to get the American Republic, because American loyalists fought American Republicans. You know, and 1 million Americans had to kill each other in the American Civil War to keep the Republic. So it's not an easy thing.
It's not easy.
600,000 Americans died in the Civil War. You know, some wanted, you know, the Confederacy wanted separation, and Lincoln always said that his main aim wasn't so much slavery, but it was to maintain the Union, to maintain the Republic. You know, so the thing about a republic is you often have competing factions and forces in a republic that maybe don't want the republic, want something else. You know,
well,
in Ireland we have, like I said, we have the added issue. We have a foreign government backing one side. That's a major part of the problem. You know.
It certainly complicates an already complicated situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the British were so close to recognizing the Confederacy, but after the Battle of Antietam, Lincoln brought in the Emancipation Proclamation, and Britain, which had just ended the slave trade, could not be seen to be siding with a country that was a slave country. But had that happened, and like, it's amazing, had those Union soldiers not wanted Antietam, it's very possible that the British would have, which was the most powerful empire at the time of the world, would have backed the Confederacy, and America today would be two nations. The Confederacy kind of thing, you know. So you know, there's a lot to play for in history. There's agency, and there's individuals, and there's you know, do the times make the man, or does the man make the times? And it's all these arguments, you know.
Yeah. But, well, no, I mean, that's it. We said before we came on, like, it's a very complicated question.
Complicated, yeah.
And you know, violence doesn't help, and there's all, as you said, you know, terrible things happened, and you know, how do we kind of come together? Brendan wanted to know, did your family know that you were involved? I suppose when you became involved as a younger, you know, man. And
absolutely not. In fact, when I was arrested on the Marina Anne, the special branch went to my mother and father's home in Sobridge, and I found out later that they had a hell of a time convincing them it was me. They said, your son has been arrested, and they says, no, he can't be. He's an ex-Marine. He's not in the IRA. And so they convinced themselves that somebody had stolen my passport or something. I don't think till they actually a week later visited me in Portlaoise prison could they accept it was me. So no, they didn't know, and they had a very hard time, you know, even being convinced I had done it. So what I say was, look, had I had my way, I would have continued in the IRA, never been caught, never been informed on, and to this day, nobody would ever have known I had done it, and I wouldn't have been writing no book. You know what I mean? And I actually would have been happier that way. I'm only known as an IRA volunteer because of informers.
Yeah,
you know, I know people in the IRA who did fantastic, who were fantastic people in the IRA for years, and were never caught, never. And to this day, nobody knows they were ever in the IRA. So and so they will be very, very surprised.
Yeah. So, John, on that note, like, do you feel safe? I mean, I know you're living at home, maybe not able to come to America, or reluctant to come back because of, I don't know why, you know, you can talk about that if you like, but do you feel safe? Or
I feel safe, yeah. I mean, well, I don't know if anybody's totally safe, but I mean, the fact of the matter is I've been in less worse positions than this, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would never let fear stop me from doing something I believed is the right thing to do. The thing about the States is I'm working on it now. I was indicted over there, and the charges were dropped. They were brought back. They were dropped again. I just want to make sure there's nothing outstanding. I'm 95% sure I'm okay. But at 65 years of age, I don't want to sit over there, you know, on remand in a thing, fighting a case for 2 years, you know.
Absolutely not, yeah.
So I want to be sure, but I'm working on it right now, and I hope I can come over, and I'd love to be able to go. And I haven't been in the States in 35 years.
Yeah.
Now, I would have lived in Ireland anyway, whether I joined the IRA or not. I was going to come home to Ireland, but of course I'd love to have the freedom, you know. Go anywhere I want. I mean, so I don't really feel free, you know. While you know,
this is hanging over you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you look at like Martin McGuinness sent me to the States to buy guns, but Martin McGuinness could go to the White House.
Yeah.
I know. Go to the White House, and I'm stuck here, you know. So that's it. But look at I'm no victim. I'm no martyr. I'm a volunteer. I did it willingly. I'm proud of everything I did. I was never involved in anything personally that I couldn't stand over. I know bad things happen, but I wasn't personally involved in them, you know. And I'm glad I did what I did, and I just wish we had achieved our political goals, and that's basically it. I'm happy within myself. I'm devastated politically that it went the direction away from republicanism and into it's sort of like this thing, you know, if you can't do what counts, make what you can do count. So, you know, you can't get the republic. Well, then start saying, well, it's just about United Ireland. You know, but United Ireland, it's not really united either when you really look at it. So, you know, I know some people might think that's, you know, esoteric arguments and all, but it cuts to the core of everything, our sovereignty, you know, and the Brits know that too, and the Brits are always determined to maintain their position of sovereignty. They never cared about autonomy. They had a thing back years ago called surrender and regrant. They would surrender, you know, the positions to Irish chieftains, run the place as long as you know we're sovereign and we can close you down any time. And even Storm it, they set that up, and they said it was the democratic will of people to vote. But the Brits closed it 5 or 6 times, just, you know, whenever it suits them. So it's to me, it's almost farcical. I think only Irish people should make its laws and set its course for Ireland. Again, I don't see that as an extremist position. I see it as a basic demand.
Yeah. So people, if you want to ask a question, you just type it in the Q&A or the chat feature there, and I'll moderate those. So on that, you just, you said you don't have regrets and things. Did you take part in the Boston College interviews, John, or anything like that?
No.
Yeah.
I might have if I had to part in them because of what happened. But I think that's been resolved, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think, they, I think they're closed again. I don't think they opened them. Did they? There was a little bit of access given, but I think there was no arrests made out of it, or.
Well, writing the book was, I actually wrote a novel, and I spent about 3 years on it. Thought it was pretty good. And when I went to the States to get it published, or I was talking to American publishers, they were saying, "No, we want your story. Marines, Whitey, Bulger, IRA, all the stuff. We want to hear your story." But I didn't see how I could tell my story. But anyway, I canvassed people and I did a bit of work, and I think I've managed to write a memoir that doesn't incriminate me or anybody else.
Okay.
It's important. Like I it's not a kiss and tell. I'm not naming names. And
I
mentioned Martin McGuinness, but Martin McGuinness unfortunately has died. I mean, I would have my political differences with Martin McGuinness, but I liked him as a person. I like him as an individual, and I would have my political differences with him. But unfortunately, and I'm very sorry to hear that he did pass away, so he can't be incriminated. I mean, I wasn't in. It's not a kiss and tell. I'm not implicating anybody.
It's very much your story, and
it's my story. But my concern is explaining the Republic and explaining, how people like me perceive the Irish Republic. That's the important thing. Yeah.
And it's exciting, like your Marines, all of that. Kathleen wants to know.
Sorry?
Kathleen has a question. I'm wondering if you brought anything from the Marines that helped the paramilitary army. We were talking about that at the start. Like in the Dark's book, he didn't want him to get his picture taken and how not to stand out. Was your accent a hindrance or a help? And she thanks you for being
it was a hindrance. Because back then it would have been a much stronger American accent back then, especially when I was just home from the Marines. And that's where the nickname the Yank came in. As I say in the book, I would tell boys, Jesus, call me anything. I don't care what you call me. I know,
you might as well call me by my name.
Call me anything. But please, because if we're in a bugged house or anything,
Yeah.
And like I said, I was telling that story to the American publisher, and he says, "Oh, we're going to call the book The Yank," It's not what I would have called the book, but anyway, it's okay. So yes, my accent would have been a hindrance. Yeah. Although it was a help when I went back to the States then.
Okay.
Because
I
didn't stand out then. Yeah.
And when you did, when you went back to the States, so to the question, we did talk about it at the start, Kathleen, sorry, that, he did bring technical know-how about even the guns, like to use suppressors on the guns, and you were saying about in the helicopters, not to move while you're on the ground because the helicopters overhead can see movement. So there were absolutely bits, but it kind of fell apart. Like they really, leadership was not interested in having you retrain.
I found the leadership didn't have the respect for training that I thought they should have. That the Marines had. The Marines had an enormous respect for training. I found that leadership loved. But you see, they weren't trained professionals themselves. They came through a guerrilla army. They had led civilian lives.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to seen but the thing about it is the boys on the ground, the men on the ground actually wanted this and were very keen on it. Yeah. So it's one thing that disconcerted me a great deal. Yeah. I mean, I could go on and on about it. Actually, I didn't really want to. I don't want to be critical of the IRA in that way because you see, I admired them. I joined them because I admired them. I looked up to them. And they weren't stupid. It's not nothing like that. I mean,
but you don't know.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, I can't fly the space shuttle. I don't think that makes me stupid. It just means I'm not trained to do it.
Yeah.
Very, very intelligent guys for the most part, and very committed. And hats off to them. I mean, it's not too many people would do what they did for their country. At great personal risk and a great hardship and a great loss of years in prison and their lives. So I admire them. I do admire them. Yeah.
Abby wants to know, what do you make of some members of the post-Good Friday Agreement generation in Northern Ireland who are taking sort of more of an interest in renewed paramilitary activity without having had that first-hand understanding of the brutality of the Troubles?
Well, I don't know anything about these other groups, right? And but it appears to me that they're formidable to everyone but the enemy.
Okay.
I mean, and they're very heavily infiltrated by British intelligence. They're very heavily infiltrated, and my concern would be, one of my concerns would be that the Brits have done this before, is that a time of tension could come up, and there could be maybe, if there ever was a threat of a renewal of conflict, some agent in one of these groups could set off a bomb that would kill a bunch of innocent civilians. And then that's the whole world. That's Irish Republicans. That's them for you. They're just murdering civilian killers and all that. The Brits do this all the time. I would be concerned that some individuals and some groups could possibly be a conduit for that. I don't know them, so I don't want to accuse them of being agents and stuff. But I do know. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced, and I'm talking to people and all, that they're very. But then again, the Provisional IRA was very heavily infiltrated by British intelligence. For Christ's sakes, the head of our security was a British agent. You know what I mean? The man in charge of keeping British agents out of the IRA was a British agent. And that was only the tip of the iceberg. So yeah, I would have no brief for any of these groups whatsoever. I don't. But having said that, I don't know who they are, and I know nothing about them.
Yeah, I mean, we hear talk of kind of disaffected youth and young men like 19, 20 that don't have many opportunities economically. That there's depression and PTSD is quite high, even among a younger generation that didn't necessarily grow up, and so that there's this kind of acting out almost.
Well, I would hate to think anybody would join an armed organization because they were depressed. That's the last person you want. You need people who are politically aware and highly motivated.
Okay.
But at the same time, if you feel downtrodden, and sometimes, and I found this in the IRA in the 80s, the hunger strikes and all, in different times, sometimes a young man, fighting back does give them a sense of worth, a sense that they're doing something, that they're taking on the state that's downtrodden them. But every young man and women in every situation, I mean, I'm sure the American rebels at Bunker Hill, I mean, many of them might have been young men with no prospects and no money, no nothing, but they felt they were doing something and they were risking their lives, and it's in every situation, But I don't like the concept that people join the IRA because they couldn't get a job or this or that. I mean, I think the only reason people should join the IRA, in my opinion, is to fight for the Irish Republic. And to have a political understanding of what you're doing, and then have the military competence to do it properly. That would be my preference. But having said that, I'm not advocating armed struggle or anything. I'm not. I'm happy. I'm happy with the peace. I'm critical of the process. I'm critical of the process, but I support the peace, and I wouldn't advocate. But the only thing is, down the road, I just do not trust the Brits. I do not trust the British government. So God knows what the future holds,
Yeah, well, and we just have to get past this Brexit and protocol and elections in the north. Betty wants to know, were you aware of any Protestants in the IRA when you were active with them?
Yes, I was. Not a lot, but there were a small handful of Protestants in the IRA. One, I don't want to name him. I say the security force know who he is, but at a very senior level. Now, having said that, he didn't practice his religion. He wasn't religious. He was probably an atheist, but he was from a Protestant background. Well, there weren't a lot of Protestants, but there were Protestants. Yes, I was aware of Protestants in the IRA. Yeah, definitely, and good IRA men. Good. I find that a Protestant Republican is very often your best Republican, because well, maybe not your best Republican, but coming from a real sound Republican ethos and ideology.
Right. Yeah.
Because, without the Protestant Reformation that broke the hierarchical, view of the Catholic paradigm in the Middle Ages, you couldn't, concepts such as individual autonomy, and standing before God as an individual and that type of thing couldn't have progressed. And without that, concepts like democracy and republicanism couldn't progress. So without the Protestant Reformation, actually, the entire concepts of democracy and Protestantism and republicanism could never have evolved. That could never have evolved if Europe had stayed just in the Catholic medieval mindset, the feudal mindset. Again, I don't want to start getting all philosophical here, but to answer the question, yes, I did know Protestants in the IRA, and they were good Republicans.
I'm just checking if we have other questions. I don't think so. If there's any more questions here, you just type them in and we'll ask. But to remind all of our members, I'm trying to look for the events next week. Sorry, next week on Monday, we're showing in our film club The Wind That Shakes the Barley. So going back, John, to our Civil War conversation and the early days of independence in Ireland. Movie. Yeah. And then on Tuesday, we have two historians from Ireland who will discuss their new book, The Diaries of Michael Collins. So that's Tuesday at 5:30 on Zoom. And then on the 16th, Wednesday, we continue our Great Hunger Black 47 commemoration series with Dr. Cian McMahon from Nevada University. He's going to talk about the coffin ships. Betty reckons, she's one of our members, that one of her own relatives was a Protestant in the North involved in Republicanism. Yeah, Betty Devine. Well, that's, as you said, it has a long history. The United Irishmen, Napper Tandy.
Well, one of the real ironies in Irish history is that Republicans was founded by Protestants with no Catholic base, and then more or less ended up led by Catholics with almost no Protestant base. That's one of the, that's another story for another day to explain how that happened. But what I want to say is Republican is no Protestant or Catholic, just Irishman.
Just Irish, exactly, yeah. And, sometimes I think we are headed in the right direction there. A lot of, Unionists are embracing the Irish language, some of them. And, so if we can get the cultural side maybe to come on board a bit, as well, to be a step towards a unity, So John, thank you very much. It's great to talk to somebody who, you really did obviously live and breathe your beliefs, which is, increasingly, I think, rare to see, right? And so, you grew up in the IRA in the times of Bobby Sands and all those other patriots and difficult times, and as you said in your book, you were prepared to risk your life for your political beliefs, and not everybody is prepared to do that. Yeah. So thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much.
And, we definitely, the Irish American Heritage Museum, we try not to be sectarian, we try not to give, one side or the other. We're obviously a history museum, and Irish Americans have been very involved. The diaspora have been very involved, as you knew from your work here, with the Freedom for All Ireland movement, so in various shapes. So we're glad to have brought your work to the attention of our members and wider. So thank you so much for staying up so late at home. I know it's 20 past midnight there, so thank you very much. And
I really appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.
Good. Me too. Thank you very much. And the book is available in our shop. If anyone wants to call the museum tomorrow or email, and of course in all your local bookstores or that online superstore that we won't talk about. So thank you very much, and good night.
Yeah.